Hi, this is again Renee Martinez Ornelas with my competency presentation part two for my capstone class HSML 4750. All right. Just like the other one, I made a table of contents, basically the exact same format. First, similarities and differences, then the human service and learning and shaping that I learned from these specific assignments or competencies, strengths and weaknesses, and an example of something I think I did really well. And it's basically the four parts of the presentation rubric. First, the similarities for these five different competencies. Um, First, the history, I guess, is applied to all of them because they were all nonprofit organizations. So I feel that they were all similar. They all had their history. They all have their history and foundations, especially the ones that go back decades of years. They have a core mission that's similar to the other ones. It's just specific to whatever community or need they are providing to. But that's one of the similarities I found in general. Another one was the structure. Um, well, it's mentioned in a lot of the check boxes for the competencies, and it's understandable because it is a organization that it has to be built the same way. Therefore, the planning that goes into it has to be followed, especially if when it's an agency or an organization that's going to be governed by state or federal taxes. So I noticed that a lot of the similarities are not just between the NPOs or nonprofit organizations, but businesses in general or organizations in general. They have certain standards, guidelines, rules, laws that they have to follow in order for it to be legitimate and successful in a way. Another similarity was the process. In general, every competency, besides the first one, which was about philosophy and the historical or the foundations of a nonprofit organization, I feel like process is something that they all have in common because it's not just one set of responsibilities or duties. It was a process. There was a beginning, middle, and an end, and in a lot of them there was like an evaluation, so an afterthought or a bonus. So it was a process that included feedback, and that was part of the development that I noticed as well in each one, and that includes competency number 5, which is the one about the philosophical and historical foundations, because like a lot of nonprofit organizations, they started with one mission statement and realized that they could offer more programs or outreach to more individuals, satisfy more needs. So I guess that was also a development process that they may have started small, but after being successful and with the resources or funding, they maybe were able to offer more in the future. So I guess that is also a similarity with all of the competencies. Strategizing, each one of them, I believe, is they have their own strategy in order to be successful. A lot of them had a commonality in what they were looking for, but each one had their own specific goal. Or, for instance, one of them had to be a management style or management of a nonprofit organization. The other one was public relations. Another one was program planning, or like the first one that was about foundations or philosophical foundations as well. Each one of them had to strategize to their nonprofit organization and specifically to their mission and their what they wanted to get accomplished in that certain community. So they had to make sure that everything they planned, organized, and delivered was with that in mind. And that's understandable because nonprofit organizations are mission based. And if anything is not working towards that, then it's probably not necessary, or maybe not, I don't want to say a waste of time or resources, but it's not benefiting the nonprofit organization or the community. So I saw that all of them had their own specific strategy in order to get their mission accomplished. All right, the differences that I saw were, like I mentioned, there was very few that I noticed. Specifically, it was that each one of them had their own internal or their own identity, which was in order to accomplish a certain goal or mission. Their processes were, their structure was the same, but their processes may have been different, especially in development. So some of them may have been internal, specifically just for the nonprofit organization, without having any community involvement, maybe even before the nonprofit was opened. And then the other one was external, which was speaking with the community, the members, individuals, or just public at large about what was needed, and maybe work literally from scratch to developing something that maybe was hypothetical and maybe came into existence, especially for organizations that are looking for more programs or looking to open up new locations. I can see that happening with some of these development or competencies. And that's where it also brought departmental. The operations were unique to each one. So you could have a large nonprofit organization have members, and it happens a lot now that I've worked at a couple of them or volunteered at some, where people at a certain nonprofit organization don't necessarily know who is running the organization. They just know that they are a part of it, and an important part of it, since they are delivering the services and the programs or managing that location. But they're not necessarily involved with public relations or marketing or the board members or like who's on the board. So I felt that was a difference between all of them. Also, all of that, I guess, comes down to the impact ultimately on the impact that each one has. So some of them have a universal impact, like the first competency in this presentation, number 5, which was about the foundations of a nonprofit organization, their philosophy and their history behind it. I feel that has an impact on everything from a community to the individual in that community, and even society at large, depending how big that organization may become and all the benefits that they may provide. Also, something like nonprofit management or program planning, that's especially for a nonprofit a small nonprofit, it would be, the impact would be a lot more local. It may be more successful or more, it would maybe better to evaluate and measure the impact, but it is different than something that's broad in general, like the other competencies. So that was some of the differences I noticed. Nothing, they're pretty much all related, all the differences, but that's what I noticed in between each individual one. And the learning and I guess shaping of, for me as in human services, specifically was the, well, I have 4 listed here. Basically, this first one is philosophy, with the history of nonprofit organizations. It was really interesting to see how nonprofit organizations started during a time of crisis. So I believe it was during the first, I don't know if it was after World War or during the Great Depression. There was obvious need, mass need in this country and society, probably all over the world, but specifically here, and how where there was need, there was people willing to help voluntarily, and that's how it began. Um, the other thing I learned that helped me, I guess, shape my interest moving forward with human services was learning about the operations, not too different than a business uh, atmosphere or any other organization, but their operations from day to day to long-term planning, um, having the structure like we mentioned before, from CEOs to managers to supervisors to HR departments to volunteers. That was the biggest difference from the business, was the volunteer portion of it. But everyone is aware of the nonprofit organization's mission and goals. And especially if you're a part of it, if you're an employee or staff member, then there is a long-term aspect to it. So you know that what you're doing is good for that day, that time, maybe that week, that season, that program. But looking forward, it's the mission is long term. So it's constant. It's never accomplished per se. Uh, Also, the diversity of programs was another thing I really learned and shaped my future outlook on human services in general. Having taken a few classes and done research, and now just Googling stuff makes it interesting that there are so many resources, organizations in particular, that are available to the public that need it, and that's very neat. That's very good for society, especially depending on what community you may live or where you may reside, or uh, your or an individual's living situation in general. I guess it doesn't matter where they live, but it's very interesting the diversity of resources there is out there for people, and that includes the programs. Anything from basic household utilities needs to something more severe or like a chronic or terminal ill patient could have uh, a resource, a nonprofit organization that's willing to help them. And that's very interesting. That's very important for the public because it provides hope for a lot of people that may not see it. And along with that diversity of nonprofit organizations, I learned that there are plenty of opportunities for individuals who may have not considered the nonprofit sector as a career choice. So anything from volunteering to working seasonally, part-time, to making a career and scaling upward is something very, very useful for myself and in general, something I can maybe help grow my network, not for my sake, but for any other individuals that I feel would be good human service professionals. So I learned that there is a lot of opportunity for anyone to help. And if you're interested in making a career, then it's also a possibility. All right, the strengths. Sorry about that. Basically, I learned because I have taken business classes before I switched majors and things. I know uh, the strength of the structure of operations for an organization, and now a nonprofit organization specifically. Um, I can, I guess, if I had the time to research any organization, I would be able to identify a chain of command and the operating structure of an organization. Um, Advocacy, I know I listed that last time as one of my weaknesses. That was on a broad sense, advocacy of any uh, need that is out there. but I see it as a strength this time around for almost the same reason, as in I've learned that if you look, uh, the outreach is there. You just have to reach out. And in particular, for individuals that don't have the resources to look, they don't have internet, they don't have a phone, they don't have a computer, they don't have the people, the know-how or the know-who to reach in order to communicate with these organizations is there. It's as simple as looking one organization up that has a list of network or resource organizations at their disposal that they can refer you to. Also the diversity of it. So if almost any need I see, I can look up and inform or refer someone to, which is very neat. Also research, like I mentioned before, on the structure side, um, I've learned, especially now that I've been interning and done some volunteer hours, that if you really wanted to be a part of an organization that you were interested in being a part of, specifically because of the programs they offer, then you can find it. You just need to give yourself time to research it, inform yourself about it, talk to them, go in person, interview, and then ask the necessary questions to see if it is really something you want to be a part of. I was fortunate enough to find a good internship place that has definitely strengthened my resolve in why I want to be a human service professional. So that's why I believe it's a strength. A weakness, the only one I could find was board development, because I haven't really had the opportunity to interact or be a part of the board, since it meets very rarely and usually not on any location of where I have served or volunteered before. I basically know what I've learned through books and what I've researched online or seen on TV. And I know that it is voluntary. And I believe I know that people are elected and selected to be a part of the board, and it's not a permanent seat, but revolving. And I believe maybe this board CEO, I think they get paid, because I know I've seen or heard about them getting bonuses. So that was always interesting. But I guess the disheartening part about it is that politics does take over a lot of that. So favoritism falls into place, fundraising money. So I know that's something that is very biased, and it's part of the world in any organization, I guess. But that is something that I would like to learn more about. I hope to be a part of a board one day. I know I had the opportunity to do that for my school, elementary and middle school that I graduated from for 8-9 years of my early education. They asked for professional alumni to be a part of a board, and there was 5 of them, and I asked to be a part of one, but we haven't had our first meeting, so I can't necessarily say I've been a part of one. But I'm really interested in seeing how that goes, so organization, planning, and the outcomes. But this is a weakness I would like to know more about, because I know that they have a great influence on nonprofit organizations in general. An example of my competency that I believe I mastered was the one on program planning. Basically, I remember doing an assignment that I felt very proud I did. And not only did the grade reflect it, but I felt really good about what I had done, because it felt really realistic, I guess, starting from the bottom up. First of all, the outline, I remember thinking it was going to be a hard assignment, because the initial assignment required a lot. It was about 3 or 4 steps, and there was going to be a lot of work included in one assignment, which is understandable, final project. The outline, I remember thinking about it, I'm like, this is a little bit general and ambitious and may seem too simplified. But that was just at an outline. I remember when I did, well, I may have draft and research misplaced and we're in that step, but when I drafted my first proposal, it was basically a summary of what I wanted to do or wanted to accomplish. And I remember looking at similar programs that were provided to the same population that I was interested in working with, which was at-risk youth, in particular people or kids that have been arrested or had been in trouble with the law, but were still minors, so could still clear their history and start off fresh. So I remember looking at programs and hearing about them through friends and other organizations and people that worked at those organizations that I asked, and then researching the programs more in depth, and ultimately adding my twist or my personal style to it, which is basically making it into something, connecting my hobby to it, which was lately mountain bike riding. So I remember being excited about that because I do that either by myself or with my brother or cousin, just maybe 2 or 3 of us. And it's always very, very relaxing, even though it's a strenuous exercise. But I remember it was a great experience, to say the least, every time we do that. And I remember when I did my final proposal, I remember my objectives weren't as ambitious as I thought and seemed very realistic. The possibilities, the impact that it would have on those kids' lives, even though it was hypothetical, seemed so real that I felt like if I ever had the opportunity to start a program or infer or provide assistance, then that would be one of the first things I would mention. And I remember I felt very good about it because now that there is an opportunity to work with juveniles that have been incarcerated or are still currently incarcerated through the nonprofit organization that I am currently interning. It seems very, it seems within reach that I can maybe provide that proposal and have them tweak it or do whatever they want, because I know it's a lot harder than just making it up on my own for all the liabilities and policy that needs to be followed, which is perfectly understandable. But that was one of the competencies that I felt very proud of, just because of that one assignment that I made. And that's the end for this competency. Hopefully I didn't take too long. Thank you, and I will see you again.